Welcome to True Echo, where the hidden truths of power, justice, and redemption come to life through powerful, emotional storytelling. In today's gripping episode, we unravel the unbelievable story of a young black girl bullied at one of the nation's elite schools, until she does the unthinkable. With nowhere left to turn, she calls the one man she barely knew, a ghost from America's most secretive military files. What happens next will leave you speechless. Now, get ready for a story that feels too real to be fiction. One that will shake your faith in power, and restore your belief in justice. The yellow school bus screeched to a halt in front of Westfield Academy, its shiny bronze crest glinting in the sun like a seal of untouchable legacy. Aaliyah Mitchell stepped down, her sneakers pressing into the polished marble walkway like an outsider entering sacred ground. Her heart pounded harder with each step, but she kept her chin up. Behind those ivy-wrapped brick walls, Westfield stood as a citadel of power, one where wealth, legacy, and secrecy ruled. And she, a scholarship student, was the crack in their perfect glass. Students in pressed uniforms turned to gawk. Their eyes weren't just curious, they were dissecting. Her dark skin, her modest clothes, even the way she held her books, everything about her screamed, "Not one of us." Still, Aaliyah clutched the silver pendant that had belonged to her late grandmother. "You're stronger than anyone who tries to bring you down," she had always said. That strength echoed in Aaliyah now, pressing her forward through whispers and stares. Inside the principal's office, the welcome was colder than the marble floors. Principal Calloway, with a smile as tight as a closed fist, extended a limp hand. "I hope you adapt quickly to our high standards, Miss Mitchell." She nodded. "I will," her voice clear but gentle. She didn't expect kindness. She had only come for one thing, a shot at a future no one here thought she deserved. As she turned to leave, she bumped into a wall, not of brick but arrogance. Logan Hastings. Golden-haired, icy-eyed, the son of Mayor Thomas Hastings and the unspoken crown prince of Westfield. "So this is the scholarship girl," he sneered loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. "Didn't know we were accepting charity cases now." His friends laughed on cue. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She looked him in the eye, her calm stare slicing through his sneer. She said nothing because silence, when wielded with dignity, is sometimes louder than a scream. She walked past him head high. That moment, though brief, was seismic. Logan had never met resistance. Not from teachers, not from students, and certainly not from girls like her. And that quiet defiance burned into his pride like acid. What she didn't know was that in that single glance she had declared war. And Logan Hastings was a boy who never lost. Not because he fought well but because the entire town fought for him. In the cafeteria that afternoon, Aaliyah sat alone at a corner table, eating the lunch her mother had packed. Leftover chicken, a small apple, and a handwritten note that said, "You're brave." As she chewed slowly, the room fell quiet again. Logan approached, flanked by his loyal pack. Brock, the real estate tycoon's son, Ethan, the judge's heir, and Trey, whose father ran the police department. He stopped in front of her table and smiled, a smile with knives behind it. "Why don't you try the beef Wellington on today's menu?" He said. "Oh wait, I forgot. That's not in your budget." The laughter that followed cut deeper than his words. But Aaliyah just stared at him, her gaze as unmoved as before. And that, again, enraged him. So Logan flipped her lunch off the table with a sudden swipe. The box crashed to the ground, scattering food like a spilled secret. "This is a school for winners, Mitchell," he hissed. "Act like you belong, if you ever want to stay." As silence choked the cafeteria, a soft voice spoke. "Don't mind them." Zoe Wilson, the janitor's daughter, knelt to help pick up the scattered lunch. Her presence wasn't grand, but her kindness was revolutionary. Aaliyah blinked hard, swallowing the emotion building in her throat. "I'm not afraid of him," she said quietly. Zoe nodded. "That's exactly why he'll never stop." From across the room, Logan watched them. And for the first time in his life he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not the fear of being hurt, but of losing control. In his world, girls like Aaliyah didn't resist, they broke. But she hadn't even cracked. That night, back in their tiny apartment, Aaliyah told her mom nothing. Instead, she quietly did her homework, gripping the silver pendant at her chest as if it were armor. But her mother could see it, the way her daughter's shoulders held an invisible weight. The next morning, the war escalated. Her locker had been vandalized, bright red slurs streaking across the metal like blood. "You don't belong here," screamed in letters so large the teachers had to walk around it. But they did nothing. No detentions. No punishments. Just averted eyes and quiet avoidance. When Aaliyah reported it to Principal Calloway, he barely looked up from his desk. "These kinds of things happen," he said. "Try not to make a fuss." The way he said it made her feel smaller than ever. On the way out, she overheard him whispering on the phone. "Handled it as you instructed, Mayor Hastings?" That night, Aaliyah sat with her mother Monica, whose face looked more exhausted than usual. "They let me go today," Monica said quietly. "Said it was budget cuts. But we both know who's behind it." The hospital had bowed to pressure. The same pressure that was now suffocating their home. "I wish your father were here," Monica whispered. Aaliyah turned sharply. "Why don't you ever talk about him?" Her mother's face froze. Then, slowly, she reached into a small box under the bed. She pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a photo, and a letter with a black seal from the Department of Defense. Aaliyah's breath caught. Her father was not dead. He was not ordinary. He was the Reaper, a legendary sniper whose missions were so secret they didn't officially exist. Fear. Ruthless. Untraceable. And possibly still alive. "I need to find him," Aaliyah said. Monica hesitated, then handed her a phone number with a single note beneath. "Only call in case of emergency." Aaliyah didn't wait. She dialed the number with trembling hands. A deep voice answered. Cold. Calculated. Familiar somehow. "Who gave you this number?" he asked. "My name is Aaliyah Mitchell. I'm your daughter. And we need you." There was silence. Then a breath. "I'll be there tomorrow." The next morning felt different. Aaliyah woke before sunrise, her body still wrapped in exhaustion but her mind racing with purpose. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Her mother hadn't slept much either, pacing the living room long into the night, glancing anxiously at the front door like she expected it to explode open at any second. They didn't speak over breakfast. Just exchanged silent looks filled with unspoken questions. Would he really come? What would he look like? Was he dangerous? Was he still a father? Aaliyah left for school with a weight on her shoulders that wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. Something was coming. And whatever it was, it would change everything. At Westfield Academy, nothing had changed on the surface. Students still walked in cliques. Logan still held court with his friends near the main staircase. But there was a tension in the air, thin as silk but sharp enough to cut. Aaliyah felt it. And strangely so did Logan. He watched her from across the hallway, arms crossed, jaw tense. She didn't avoid his gaze. Didn't flinch. And that unnerved him. Deep inside, Logan sensed something was shifting. He didn't know what, but it prickled at the edges of his arrogance like static electricity. She wasn't scared anymore. And that terrified him. During lunch, Aaliyah sat with Zoe as usual. But this time she wasn't just enduring the stares and whispers, she was observing. Calculating. Like someone who had inherited more than just trauma. She had inherited strategy. "Are you okay?" Zoe asked, noticing the calm in her eyes despite the chaos that still surrounded her. "I think he's coming," Aaliyah whispered. "Who?" "My dad." Zoe blinked. "I thought he was gone." "He's not. He's just been watching. Waiting. And now he's on his way." Across town, beneath the rusted awning of an old train station cafe, a man sat at a booth facing the window. The sunlight filtered through the dusty glass and fell across his sharp jawline, his eyes hidden behind dark aviators. He wore a simple gray jacket, plain jeans. Unremarkable to anyone passing by. Except he wasn't unremarkable. Not to the man sitting across from him. "John Mitchell," said Marcus Reed, his voice low, cautious. "I thought I'd never see you again." "You almost didn't," Mitchell replied without blinking. "They said you were dead. They say a lot of things." Reed leaned forward, whispering now. "This isn't just a town full of corrupt suits anymore. The Hastings family owns the police, the courts, the school board. You sure you're ready for this?" John Mitchell, the man known only in hushed tones as the Reaper, lifted his head slightly, revealing eyes as cold and focused as rifle scopes. "They made a mistake," he said. "They touched my daughter." Reed nodded solemnly. "Then God helped them." That afternoon, as the last bell rang at Westfield Academy, Aaliyah stepped out of the building to find the sky overcast and thick with heat. The wind had died. The air felt like it was holding its breath. She walked toward the small cafe across from the school, the one the voice had told her to go to. Her palms were sweating. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She spotted a man in the corner booth through the window. It was like seeing a ghost in real time. He stood as she entered, towering and lean, his movements quiet and precise like he was still in uniform. "Aaliyah," he said softly. She froze. The sound of his voice sent chills down her spine, not from fear but familiarity. She had never heard it before. And yet she knew. "You're really here?" she whispered. Mitchell nodded once. "I came as soon as you called." For a moment they just stood there. Two strangers bound by blood and broken time. And then, without another word, Aaliyah stepped forward and hugged him. Hesitantly at first, then fiercely, clinging to him like the childhood she never had. Mitchell didn't move. But his eyes softened, and his hand gently rested on her back. That was all she needed. They sat across from each other as the cafe emptied around them. "They've hurt Mom. They've destroyed everything. And I tried. I really tried to fight them." "You did more than try," he said quietly. "You stood your ground. That's why I'm here." Aaliyah looked down. "But what can we do now? They control everything." Mitchell leaned in, voice low and deliberate. "The thing about people who think they own everything, they never see the fall coming. But I do. I've seen it 100 times before." She blinked. "So, what's the plan?" "I start small. Quiet. We let the truth speak for itself. The Hastings family built their empire on lies. All I have to do is pull one thread, and the whole thing unravels." Aaliyah stared at him. This man, her father, wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist. A ghost who had returned not to fight a war but to end one. "Go home," he said. "Act normal. Don't let them know I'm here." She nodded, her trust now complete. Across the street, from the shadows near a black SUV, someone watched the two of them. A man in a suit, earpiece in his ear, camera in his hand. He picked up his phone and made the call. "Sir, we've got a problem." Back in the Hastings estate, Logan sat with his father in the high-ceilinged study, scrolling through the latest news on his phone. There had been rumors, whispers, articles hinting at corruption, anonymous tips submitted to local blogs. The mayor's jaw tightened. "It's starting." "What is?" Logan asked. His father looked up, eyes wide with something Logan had never seen before. "Dread. The man we buried years ago. He's back." A full moon rose over Westfield that night, casting pale light across the town like a silent witness to the storm about to begin. Inside the Mitchell apartment, Aaliyah lay awake in bed, her eyes open, thoughts tumbling through her mind. She had met her father, the legendary ghost she'd imagined her whole life, and now he was real. Not just real but already at work, like a shadow slipping beneath the walls of a fortress. In the living room, Monica sat stiffly in an old armchair, staring at the photo Aaliyah had once held so often. When John reappeared that afternoon, she'd received a brief message on her burner phone. "We need to talk soon. I'm back." Just those words and the silence that followed. She didn't know whether to feel hope or terror. But what she did know was that the Hastings family would not sit quietly once they felt the noose tightening. And they were already feeling it. That same night, Logan Hastings couldn't sleep. Not out of guilt, he wasn't wired for that, but out of unease. Strange things had been happening. His father's trusted accountant had gone missing. The family lawyer was suddenly unavailable. 2 local news stations had begun investigating claims about embezzlement in the mayor's office. But none of that bothered Logan more than the message he had received on his private phone. "I see everything you've done. And I've only just begun." It was unsigned. No number. No trace. He had deleted it immediately, but the words echoed like footsteps behind him. Across town, in a dimly lit room filled with outdated military tech, John Mitchell was assembling pieces like a chessboard. Documents. Surveillance photos. Voice recordings. Beside him sat Marcus Reed, former Army intelligence turned quiet bookshop owner, now reactivated for something far more personal. "Local judge is compromised," Reed said, tapping on a photo of Ethan's father. "He's covered up at least 3 juvenile cases involving Logan." Mitchell nodded. "And the school board?" "Bought and paid for. But a few of them have children they still care about. Hit 'em with truth. Truth's scarier than bullets when you've lived your life hiding from it." Mitchell stared at the board, eyes narrowing. "What about public pressure?" Reed smirked. "Already scheduled. At 6 a.m. tomorrow, a package with evidence of Thomas Hastings' illegal land dealings and cover-ups goes to every local news outlet, council member and PTA board in Westfield. All with a nice little note." Mitchell leaned back, his fingers laced under his chin. "Then it begins." At school the next morning, the air was thick with static tension. Students buzzed with something more than gossip. Teachers were distracted. Even Principal Calloway kept checking his phone like it might explode in his hand. Aaliyah walked through the halls, still quiet, still composed, but inside she knew the walls were cracking. Zoe rushed to her side, breathless. Did you see the news? The mayor's office is under investigation. People are saying the school board's involved in a scandal. Aaliyah nodded, her lips twitching into the faintest smile. Good. Zoe blinked. Wait, you knew. I didn't say that, Aaliyah replied, eyes forward. But I think the truth is finally catching up to the right people. Meanwhile, Logan stormed into the principal's office, his face red, jaw tight. Why are people saying my father's going to be indicted? Calloway raised his palms. Logan, I don't know what's going on. Someone's leaking things, old reports, evidence. Even the teachers are being questioned now. I want names. Logan barked. I don't have names. Logan turned, kicked over a chair and stormed out. Behind his rage, however, was a gnawing fear. He wasn't in control anymore. That evening, the local news exploded. A special report aired across all networks, featuring leaked documents linking Mayor Hastings to land fraud, election manipulation, and ties to illicit contracts. Within minutes, hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Hastings exposed. Hashtag Westfield truth. Hashtag justice for Aaliyah. Inside the mayor's mansion, Thomas Hastings was on the phone screaming at someone, anyone, demanding loyalty, protection, a way out. But one by one his allies were disappearing. Sir, his assistant said, pale and shaking, we've received an anonymous drop. It's a video. Play it, the mayor growled. The screen flickered. A grainy recording began. It showed Logan, Ethan, and Trey surrounding Aaliyah in the hallway. The audio was clear. Let's see what this poor girl's bag holds. The video showed Logan tearing the photograph of John Mitchell into pieces. Then another scene, Logan laughing as he kicked over Aaliyah's lunch. And finally, Ethan pulling Aaliyah's gym clothes out of her locker and tossing them down the hall while she stood frozen in humiliation. The footage ended with a black screen and 4 words in white. You've been warned. The Reaper. The mayor's hands trembled. He's alive, he whispered. And he's here. Logan burst into the room. Dad, the school's gone crazy. Everyone's talking about the video. Thomas turned to him, face ashen. You don't understand, son. This isn't just some hacker. This is a man who once took down an entire militia with 3 bullets and a single breath. We're not up against some schoolgirl's fantasy. We're up against the deadliest ghost the military's ever known. Logan froze. That night, Mitchell made his final move. At 3 a.m., Mayor Thomas Hastings woke to find a sealed envelope on his bedroom nightstand. Inside was a single photo. His son, Logan, being escorted away in handcuffs, with the caption, "This is your legacy." The mayor didn't sleep again. Back at the Mitchell home, Aaliyah looked out her bedroom window into the darkness. She didn't know what would come tomorrow, but she knew one thing for sure. Her father was here. And he was just getting started. The sun rose over Westfield like a spotlight on a crime scene, revealing cracks in the once impenetrable facade of the town's elite. That morning, everything felt off. The students whispered louder. Teachers glanced at each other nervously. And the hallways of Westfield Academy, once cold and indifferent, buzzed with unspoken electricity. Aaliyah Mitchell arrived with her chin lifted, her steps steady. The hallway parted for her, not out of fear but something new. Respect. Curiosity. Maybe even awe. Zoe caught up with her near the library. They're saying Logan might be suspended. There's a meeting with the school board today. It's all over the news. Aaliyah gave a small nod but said nothing. She was no longer walking in the shadow of shame. She was walking with the weight of justice on her shoulders, and that weight no longer felt like a burden. It felt like armor. Across campus, Logan Hastings slammed his locker shut with enough force to echo down the corridor. His friends Ethan and Trey stood nearby, pale and nervous. They all saw the footage, Trey muttered. It was on every student's phone this morning. We're screwed. Logan's voice was a low growl. We're not done. My dad's handling this. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. For the first time in his life, the Hastings name wasn't shielding him. It was a target. At town hall, chaos reigned. A small protest had formed outside the building. Parents, students, even teachers, demanding accountability. Their chants echoed through the glass windows as the mayor paced in his office, veins bulging in his forehead. Inside, a laptop sat open. The Reaper had struck again. An email had been sent to every council member, accompanied by legal evidence, financial records, and time-stamped videos connecting Thomas Hastings to a web of corruption. But more chilling was the message that accompanied it. Every injustice will be dragged into the light. One by one. You can't bury the truth forever. The mayor slammed the laptop shut and turned to his chief of staff. Shut it down. Call the station. Call the judge. Buy silence if you have to. But the silence couldn't be bought anymore. The fear that once worked in his favor had flipped. Now it was working against him. Meanwhile, in a dim motel room on the edge of town, John Mitchell sat in the dark, phone in hand. Across from him, Marcus Reed monitored the chaos unfolding online. Logan's reputation is shattered. The mayor's allies are bailing. All we need now is one more push. Mitchell nodded slowly. It's time. Time for what? To give them something they can't spin. Something no one can deny. He opened his bag and pulled out a small flash drive, the final piece. Back at school, Aaliyah was summoned to the main office. The request came with tension thick enough to cut. When she stepped in, Principal Calloway sat at his desk, face taut, 2 board members seated beside him. Their expressions unreadable. We're aware of the videos, one of the board members began carefully, and we've begun a review of the incidents involving you and several other students. Calloway coughed awkwardly. However, we still urge restraint, Miss Mitchell. Escalating the situation further could. Could what? Aaliyah asked, voice calm but sharp. Make people uncomfortable? I didn't start this. I just refuse to be broken by it. The woman on the board gave her a long, appraising look. Then she slowly slid a letter across the desk. It's not official yet, but we believe an apology is due to you. And a formal statement will be made soon. Aaliyah's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the paper, but her eyes never left theirs. You're not doing this for me, she said. You're doing this because you're scared. Calloway shifted uncomfortably. I'm glad you're scared, she added. Because you should be. Outside the office, students gathered in clumps, phones in hand, eyes wide. A new video had dropped. It was drone footage, over the mayor's mansion. And inside, a hidden camera feed showed Logan and Thomas Hastings in a heated exchange, the mayor yelling about burying everything before the feds arrive, Logan panicking, admitting to everything he had done to Aaliyah. You said no one would touch me. You said I could do whatever I wanted. You were supposed to be smarter, the mayor bellowed. Now the whole town's on fire. The footage ended with a single caption. The Reaper sees all. That night, Westfield was no longer a town hiding its rot. It was a town watching it be peeled away layer by layer. Mitchell knew the war was close to over. But not quite yet. As he sat alone in the motel, his phone buzzed again. A message from an encrypted number. They're planning something. Logan isn't finished. Be ready. He stood slowly, holstering the compact sidearm beneath his coat. His instincts flared, old instincts trained in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the jungles of Colombia, in the alleys of broken cities. Danger wasn't just coming. It was already here. Back at the Mitchell apartment, Aaliyah helped her mother wash dishes as the evening news played in the background. Monica looked less worn than usual, her eyes less tired, her face softer. He really came back, she murmured. I didn't think he would. Aaliyah dried a plate and smiled faintly. I did. They were still standing by the sink when a sound shattered the moment, a sharp, echoing thud against the front door. Aaliyah froze. Then the window cracked. A rock. She rushed to the door, flinging it open in time to see a dark car speeding off. At her feet was a note taped to the rock. You should have left when you had the chance. Monica rushed to her daughter's side. Her face was pale again, her hands shaking. But Aaliyah was already pulling out her phone. She didn't call the police. She called her father. It's starting, she whispered into the phone. They're coming. And from the other end his voice came like stone. Let them. The night settled over Westfield like a warning. Dark clouds loomed over the small town as winds swept down the empty streets, rattling signs and whistling through alleyways like ghosts returning from exile. Inside the Mitchell apartment, every window was locked, every curtain drawn. But no lock could keep out what Aaliyah and her mother knew was coming. They weren't afraid anymore. Just ready. Aaliyah stood at the kitchen table, reading the threatening note again. Her hands didn't tremble. Her breath didn't stutter. She had faced worse. In classrooms, in locker rooms, in the principal's office where silence had always been the weapon of the powerful. But now the silence was gone. The truth was out. And the men who had hidden behind their wealth were finally showing their desperation. Are you sure it was Logan? Monica asked. Aaliyah didn't look up. It's always Logan. Monica bit her lip, pacing slowly behind her daughter. I knew the Hastings family would retaliate. But this is cowardice, Aaliyah finished for her. They're losing and they know it. Just then a knock at the door startled them both. Sure. Measured. 1. Then 2. Then 1 again. Aaliyah's pulse leapt, but only for a moment. She recognized the pattern. She opened the door. John Mitchell stepped inside without a word. He wore a long black coat, military boots, and a look of quiet fire. His eyes scanned the room in seconds, catching every shadow, every corner. When he was sure they were alone, he turned to Aaliyah and Monica. "I got the message too," he said calmly, holding up a photo. It was a still image from a security cam, showing Logan and 2 masked figures outside a convenience store an hour earlier. The timestamp matched the time of the rock. "They're not just bluffing," Mitchell said. "He's planning something. Possibly tonight." Monica swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Mitchell's voice was steady, quiet. "We bait the trap. Then we close it." Aaliyah tilted her head. "You mean, let them come?" "Exactly." Mitchell pulled a small case from under his coat and opened it on the table. Inside were compact surveillance cameras, a tiny recorder, and a concealed panic button with a transmitter linked to Mitchell's own frequency. Monica's eyes widened. "This is a lot." "I've been planning for a lot my whole life," Mitchell replied, his tone dry. "Logan won't go quietly. But he'll make a mistake. And we'll be waiting." That night, Aaliyah and her mother moved into position, casually doing chores, acting as though nothing had happened. Mitchell slipped into the shadows of their apartment like a phantom, positioning cameras, checking exits, monitoring sound. Every step was measured. Every breath calculated. Hours passed. Midnight neared. And just as fatigue began to creep in, a soft creak echoed from the fire escape. Aaliyah froze. Mitchell didn't. He turned sharply, his back pressed against the hallway wall, eyes focused on the narrow window that overlooked the alley. Shadows moved. A figure approached the window slowly, crouched low. Then another. Mitchell didn't speak. He simply lifted his phone and pressed a silent command. The cameras flickered to life. A light blinked green. Footage was already being recorded and streamed. The lock on the window clicked. Mitchell moved like a shadow himself, silently crossing the hallway and taking position behind the kitchen doorway. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't need to. His weapon was precision. Patience. Fear. The window lifted. A foot entered. Then a shoulder. Logan, dressed in black, slipped into the room followed by Ethan and Trey, both masked. Logan's eyes were filled with wildness, his confidence cracked by days of public shaming and family collapse. Now he looked like a cornered animal. "Where are they?" he whispered. "In the back room," Trey muttered. The 3 moved through the apartment, their footsteps as quiet as breath. Logan reached into his coat and pulled out a steel baton, flicking it open with a snap. But before he could take another step, the lights exploded on. And the Reaper stepped out of the shadows. Logan stopped cold, blinking against the sudden brightness. "What?" Mitchell moved fast. With one motion, he kicked the baton from Logan's hand, sending it clattering under the table. Logan lunged, shouting, but Mitchell sidestepped and swept his leg out from under him. Ethan and Trey panicked. Trey reached for something in his jacket. Mitchell grabbed his wrist, twisted hard, and flipped him flat onto the hardwood floor with a crunch. Ethan turned to run, but Aaliyah stepped from the hallway, calm and silent, holding her phone. "You're already live," she said softly. "The whole town is watching." Ethan froze. Mitchell stood over Logan, who now lay gasping on the floor, humiliated, defeated, furious. "You broke into a home. You brought weapons. And you thought no one would stop you?" Logan's voice cracked. "You're not a hero. You're a ghost. You don't belong here." Mitchell crouched beside him, his voice quiet but lethal. "Maybe. But neither do you." Sirens echoed outside. Red and blue lights splashed against the windows. The Hastings boys had crossed their final line, and this time, there were no connections left to save them. The police burst in moments later, taking all 3 into custody as Mitchell stepped back into the shadows. One officer nodded to him. "We've got everything. You just handed us a case with a bow on it." Mitchell didn't respond. He simply looked at his daughter, who stood tall in the hallway, her chin lifted, her eyes steady. And for the first time in his life he felt small. In awe. Because she had fought her war alone for so long, and won most of it before he ever returned. As the officers dragged Logan away, his eyes locked with Aaliyah's. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He just stared. Because in that moment he understood. He hadn't lost to a girl. He had lost to a legacy. The following morning, Westfield awoke to a headline no one thought they'd ever read. Mayor's son arrested in home invasion. Police confirm attempted assault, breaking and entering, and weapon possession. Every major outlet carried it. News vans parked along the narrow streets. Students huddled around phones in the school courtyard, teachers whispered in the break rooms. Even those who had turned a blind eye now found themselves forced to look. There was no more hiding. The Hastings name, once revered, feared, untouchable, was now splattered across tabloids, news sites, and public forums. And in every image, every article, one face stood firm in contrast to the collapse: Aaliyah Mitchell. Inside their small apartment, the air was lighter than it had been in years. The blinds were open. The sun filtered in. Monica sat at the breakfast table reading the morning paper, hands still shaking slightly but her eyes clear. Aaliyah sipped tea beside her, quiet. "They say Logan may be charged as an adult," Monica murmured. Aaliyah didn't look up. "He made adult choices." From across the room, Mitchell stood by the window, staring at the street below. He hadn't spoken much since the night before. Not because he was brooding, but because he was listening, watching the ripple effect of everything he'd set in motion. He turned finally. "They'll come after me next." Monica blinked. "The Hastings?" "No," Mitchell replied. "The government." Marcus Reed entered from the hallway then, holding a small tablet. "He's right. They're stirring. The DoD doesn't like its ghosts showing up in public." Aaliyah looked between them. "So what happens now?" Mitchell approached and placed a small flash drive on the table. "This contains everything. Every operation I was ever involved in. Every classified mission. Every file they tried to bury." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to go that far?" "I didn't come back to haunt the world," Mitchell said. "I came back to save my daughter. And now that she's safe, I'm not hiding anymore." He turned to Aaliyah, meeting her eyes with a depth that said more than words could. "I won't vanish again. But I may not always be here." Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Whatever happens, you came when it mattered." Just then the phone rang. Monica picked it up and handed it to Mitchell. The voice on the other end was low, sharp. "This is Agent Weller, Department of Defense. You've made quite the mess, Sergeant." Mitchell didn't flinch. "Just cleaning up one. You exposed sensitive materials. You acted outside protocol. And now you've got the whole country watching." "Good," Mitchell replied. "Maybe it's time they see what justice actually looks like." There was a pause. "You'll be summoned. Expect contact soon." The line went dead. Mitchell placed the phone down slowly. Monica approached, worry creasing her brow. "Will they take you back?" "They'll try," he said. "But they no longer own me." That afternoon, Westfield Academy hosted a surprise assembly. The gym was packed, students, staff, even local press. The head of the school board took the stage, his tie askew, sweat glistening on his forehead. He cleared his throat and spoke into the mic. "Over the past month, this institution has witnessed serious failings in protection, oversight, and moral leadership. We allowed our reputation to matter more than our students' safety. And today, we publicly acknowledge and apologize for the harm done to Miss Aaliyah Mitchell." A collective gasp echoed through the gym. The man stepped back as Principal Calloway approached the podium, looking significantly smaller than usual. "I failed you," he said simply, eyes on Aaliyah. "And I resign, effective immediately." Aaliyah, seated near the front with Zoe beside her, remained still, composed. But her heart thundered with something she hadn't felt in years: closure. Moments later, the crowd erupted as a school representative announced a new initiative in Aaliyah's name: the Mitchell Integrity Scholarship, aimed at supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds who showed strength of character under pressure. Zoe gripped her hand. "You changed everything." "No," Aaliyah whispered. "We did." As the assembly ended, people lined up to shake her hand. Parents, students, even teachers who had once turned away. But amid the applause and praise, Aaliyah's eyes scanned the crowd for one figure. And there he was, standing near the exit. Black coat, silent. Her father. He didn't wave, didn't speak, but he nodded. She nodded back. That evening, as the town exhaled a collective breath of justice, a convoy of black SUVs rolled quietly into Westfield. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't use sirens. They didn't knock. But they were coming. And John Mitchell was waiting. In the dark, he packed a small bag, just essentials. Then he turned to Monica and Aaliyah. "It's time." Monica's eyes shimmered. "Where will they take you?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere gray. Doesn't matter." Aaliyah hugged him hard, not as a child desperate for love, but as a woman thankful for legacy. "You came back," she said again. "I always will," he replied. As he stepped outside into the night, the wind picked up. Leaves scattered. A car door opened. Mitchell turned to look back at his home. His family. His victory. And then, without a word, the Reaper vanished once more. Weeks passed. Westfield began to breathe again, not the shallow breaths of fear, but the deep, cleansing kind that come after a storm has finally passed. The Hastings name had fallen from grace. Thomas Hastings was facing federal charges, his empire crumbling in court under the weight of Mitchell's leaked files. Logan, now sitting in juvenile detention awaiting sentencing, had become a cautionary tale, an emblem of privilege unchecked, of power without accountability. And at the heart of this transformation stood a girl who had once walked the marble halls of Westfield Academy as an outsider. Aaliyah Mitchell. Her face had become a quiet symbol, not plastered on billboards or national headlines, but passed between whispers and shared in conversations of resilience. She didn't chase attention. She didn't seek revenge. She simply endured, exposed the truth, and let the world decide what it meant to live with dignity. On a crisp morning in May, the town square hosted an event unlike any it had seen before. A public ceremony. Not for politicians, but for truth. Aaliyah stood at the wooden podium, surrounded by classmates, teachers, reporters, and citizens who once averted their eyes but now looked directly at her, admiring her strength, respecting her journey. She cleared her throat, her hands steady. I came to Westfield hoping for an education. I didn't know I'd end up in a war. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd, but it wasn't mocking. It was shared understanding. But I wasn't alone. Even when it felt like it, there were people who stood with me, friends, strangers, and one man I thought I'd lost forever. My father. A hush fell over the square. She continued. You all know him now as the Reaper. But to me he's John Mitchell. He didn't raise me, but he protected me when I needed him most. And in doing so he reminded me that silence is never safety. That speaking out, standing up, that is how we break cycles. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. If you ever feel powerless, remember this, even ghosts can return. And even one voice in the right moment can shake the walls of the powerful. Thunderous applause erupted. From the edge of the crowd, Marcus Reed watched quietly, hands in his pockets, a proud smile on his face. He knew Mitchell wouldn't be here. Couldn't be. Not physically. But he was watching. Somewhere. Later that evening, Aaliyah returned home, finding Monica in the kitchen, humming an old tune she hadn't sung in years. The apartment felt brighter now. Fuller. Safe. Monica set down a plate of steaming food. How was the speech? Aaliyah smiled. I think I finally found my voice. They sat together at the small table, surrounded by quiet warmth, the kind that only comes after surviving chaos. And then the doorbell rang. Monica looked up, puzzled. You expecting anyone? Aaliyah shook her head. She opened the door. No one was there. Just a box. Plain. Taped shut. She picked it up, carried it inside, and slowly opened the flaps. Inside was a single item. Her grandmother's silver pendant, cleaned, polished, and gleaming like new. Next to it, a folded piece of paper. Aaliyah opened it. I can't stay, but I will always be near. Dad. Her breath caught. Monica walked over, tears already glistening in her eyes. He's still watching over us. Aaliyah nodded, clutching the pendant close to her heart. I know. Across the world, in a remote outpost where no signal reached and no name held power, John Mitchell stared into the distance. His mission was different now. He didn't fight for countries anymore. He fought for people. For truth. For legacies. And he knew that his daughter didn't need protection anymore. She had become stronger than even he imagined. She had inherited not his weapons but his will. His code. And that was far more dangerous. Back in Westfield, life continued. Aaliyah graduated with honors, delivering a final speech that would be replayed for years, a reminder of what courage looked like when wrapped in humility. She received a full scholarship to Columbia University, majoring in law and public policy. Her first semester paper? The Myth of Power, When Systems Fail and Voices Rise. By the time the Hastings trial reached its final phase, the nation had moved on to other stories. But in Westfield, the memory remained fresh. The Mitchells remained humble, quiet, living their lives in the peace they had fought for. And every now and then a small envelope would arrive. No return address, no stamp. Just a note. Just enough. I saw your interview. You've grown into your strength. I was in the crowd at graduation. I'm proud of you. Always signed the same. Dad. They never spoke again. But they didn't have to. Because the Reaper had returned once. and once was enough. Some stories don't need fiction. They just need to be told. What happened to Aaliyah Mitchell could happen to anyone, when systems fail, when voices are silenced, and when power is abused. But her story isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about legacy, about what happens when even a ghost returns to finish the fight. Justice, John Mitchell once said, isn't about revenge. It's about balance. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you that silence is never strength, then let it echo. Share. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done if you were in her shoes? And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo, where we bring hidden truths, emotional stories, and unforgettable legacies into the light.